For mompreneurs, I would step back and really give yourself time to ask yourself, what would a dreamlike day look like for me right now? How can I start stepping into this, and what is standing between me and that day?
Welcome to the Good Enough Mompreneur Podcast, the show that celebrates the journey of resilient and resourceful mompreneurs just like you, helping you find balance and success while embracing the good enough mindset. I'm your host, Angela Michuli, and today we have a truly inspirational guest joining us. In this episode, I'm privileged to sit down with the incredible Whitney Baker. She is such a shining example of a mompreneur who transitioned from corporate to pursuing soul-nurturing work. Whitney's journey is one of courage and transformation. I can't wait to share it with you. She shares her secrets to not just surviving, but thriving in the sometimes murky middle of entrepreneurship when you're trying to find your way. She's a firm believer in testing your ideas and seeking feedback to help you on your path to success. So get ready to be inspired as we discuss the importance of having the courage to create a new identity in life, especially in the context of motherhood and entrepreneurship. Whitney's insights are bound to spark your own journey of reinvention. But that's not all. Whitney is a staunch advocate for collaboration over competition among mompreneurs, and she'll reveal how mindfulness and meditation play a significant role in her soulful approach to entrepreneurship. And if you're looking to boost your online presence, you won't want to miss Whitney's social media strategies for more action, authenticity, connection, and clients. It's an episode packed with wisdom and practical advice. So grab your favorite beverage, find a comfy spot, and get ready to be inspired. And help me welcome Whitney Baker to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Whitney. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited for this conversation because we were talking a little bit ahead of time, and I'm just so kind of drawn to your content because it's so soulful, and I respect anybody who has the courage to kind of blaze their own trail, and I think you're doing that. So I'm excited to have this conversation, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your time. So why don't you set the stage a little bit for our audience on, what your background was and how you transitioned to what you're doing now and what that looks like.
Sure. I think that this is a common tale and relatable tale for many mompreneurs. So I'm happy to start. I'll try to keep it high level so you don't have my entire history.
Aww.
So I would say around 2008, I graduated from journalism school. I got a master's degree, and I've always been someone who has this, I want to be of service within me. And here I was ready to change the world, and I faced the economic collapse. And I really struggled, and I ended up getting hired by a PR and marketing agency because I was a writer. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I was ready to be able to pay the bills.
Right.
I feel like my path started going kind of away from my true self all the way back then, now that I've reflected. So I worked for about 6 years and kind of ended up climbing that ladder. I learned so much. I'm grateful for that experience. And they say working at creative agencies is kind of like dog years. So I definitely got into that, prove yourself, totally workaholic. Work is a very big focus part of life.
Yeah.
Fast forward, and I had 2 little girls, and they are 4 months apart. And so that was an insane shift in lifestyle because I basically went back from maternity leave and very shortly after told him I was pregnant again. And and
They're
as
like,
you
great.
and all the moms listening can probably relate, that is just a major sea change to have one, not just one but two. So
Yeah.
I really was somebody, I felt like a lot of my friends when they were having babies knew, okay, I'm for sure going back to work. Like I feel called. I'm like, and then, or I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I felt very conflicted. I wanted it all. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually tried everything. I got my company to negotiate 4 days. Then that wasn't enough. I went down to 3 days. And here I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be that perfect balance, and
Mm-hmm.
was actually one of the first women in the company to ever be able to work that part-time. So I was like, I'm a trailblazer, and I was all excited, and it was awful. It was awful because
Yeah.
it just didn't work. I was not getting the type of projects that I wanted at work. I was not able to do the kind of work I wanted there. And then at home, I didn't have good boundaries. So I was kind of trying to do email and calls and half in, half out. And I just hit a very big burnout point. I was feeling anxious and like I was just dropping the ball across the board. So I ended up quitting, and I was supposed to be taking an intentional pause, but my I think my system and ego were so caught up in kind of that rat race that it took a long time to even unwind. I'm talking like within the first few weeks of quitting my job, I put tons of pressure on myself to like update my resume and flip my LinkedIn to freelancer. And I don't know what got into me, and I've forgiven myself for that pressure. But I was just so in it and in that go, trying to keep all the balls in the air that I'd really, really lost perspective.
Yeah.
So I will pause there and say I started, I did start more of getting back to myself during that time and giving myself space to rekindle some of my passions outside of my home and work roles, even in really small ways, because it was still life is full. I had two pretty small kids. I started freelancing again, and I was really hooked to this identity. I'm very clear on it now. It was just ego. It was like, I didn't realize how much I was hooked to being that creative person, that agency worker, that working mom. And I wasn't getting the type of jobs, freelance jobs that I wanted. So someone was like, maybe you should work with a career coach. And I was like, okay. So I tried that, and she was wonderful. I started getting better offers, and I realized something. I would have these conversations where it'd be like you have a few calls and you think you're going to get it and it's a shoo-in, and then for whatever reason it doesn't work out, and my whole body would be washed with relief. And so through my own knowing and also talking to this career coach, she's like, that's probably not a good sign. Like, she kind of asked me the question that I was afraid to ask myself, like, do you be doing this? And I was like, no, I don't. But I felt so stuck because I wanted so badly to pursue my passion, my career, and the thought of starting over was very scary.
Yeah.
So within that same year of having those resounding just no's, I gave myself permission to say no for 6 months to any freelance work and just focus on launching my business. And I've never looked back.
That is such an incredible story that I think no matter where somebody is in their entrepreneurial journey, people love to hear, that breakaway story. Like, what was it that just was it? And that is so profound because me too, when I had to step away from my career of 2 decades and, I'd done all the things, I was in it. And I literally had a breakdown because I didn't realize that my identity was so tied to what I did. We get that little achievement, gold star boost every time. So, I mean, I think that that is actually one thing that is the hardest about starting a business or whatever that you want to do that's different from what you've always done. That nobody talks about enough. That identity shift is just, man. So, and then too, I mean, I have realized that that ignited a spiritual awakening. Do you think that you've kind of undergone something like that in starting a business?
Absolutely. I feel as though all of this reclaiming myself that was
Yeah.
concurrent with my own decision to finally break free was
Mm-hmm.
on purpose.
Yep. I
And
think, yeah.
it's like I didn't realize that until
Hmm.
I was through it and past it.
Yes. Same. I got chills right now. Yeah. It was years later that I was like, holy crap, that's what happened to me.
Yes.
It
Yes.
is your soul is calling to do something and we just deny it. And, until the neon sign is like bright in our face, we have to take a step in the direction that we're just meant to go in. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't to most of
Yeah.
the people around us. And I just find that opportunity to have that awakening through becoming an entrepreneur just really fascinating. I think it's something that is just so profound that's happening to a lot of people right now. So I find that just something that we should pause and pay attention to. If if this conversation is resonating with any listeners, that might be what happened to you too, and you might not even realize it. Um, but yeah, so it sounds like at some point we have to give ourselves permission to take on this new identity, even though we don't know what it looks like. It doesn't make any sense. So, what did that like early time look like, and how did you deal with like walking in the dark?
That I love that question. So I think about that time as me being in the murky middle.
Yeah.
I was in a liminal space where I'd finally kind of shed this identity that I didn't need to be as tied to. And I had that
Hmm.
distance, even though I was still
Right.
kind of trying to freelance and figure it out. And I was
Hmm.
inviting in something different, but I didn't know what it was.
Right.
And so, a couple things that helped me, first of all, I had done a 12-week program called Made to Do This by Kathy Heller.
Hmm. I'm
And
a Kathy Heller alumni too. Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
And it really helped make a profound shift and in me seeing clearly
Hmm.
I know exactly what I love to do and
Hmm.
what I'm also good at and what I can be and that I can and just giving me that permission to let it be easy doing what I love and being of service.
Hmm.
And so that really helped me. And then
Hmm.
also a big takeaway and something that helps me bridge into starting is realizing that I intellectually wasn't going to solve the question of what's next for me in my head.
Hmm. Yeah.
I needed to get feedback. And
Hmm.
so my first electric ideas workshop was with two of my best friends. I made them
Hmm.
pay me just because I needed to get used to a transaction. I
Hmm.
did it and I did it in one of their backyards with them for $1 each. And we laughed
Hmm.
and it was just like, you have to just start doing the thing,
Oh,
because two things will happen.
mm-hmm,
One, you'll get confirmation and you'll be
mm-hmm,
like, hell yeah, this is a full body
mm-hmm,
yes, I'm doing this.
mm-hmm,
And then you get momentum. Or
mm-hmm,
two, you'll find out, okay, no, this is not right. But sitting and thinking about what you could possibly do, it
mm-hmm.
doesn't give you either of those pieces of feedback.
Right. I think that is like incredible advice. And I think your inner Kathy Heller just came out. So that sounds like something that she definitely encourages you to do is to kind of test um what you're feeling and get feedback on it. So given that feedback, let's talk about what you're doing now because I think it's so amazing. I'm so like drawn to this idea of the workshops that you create and then we'll also talk about your podcast too. We got to talk about that.
Great. Great. Yeah. So in my business journey, we can talk about it all. I was unconventional in that I launched with a podcast. And I know a lot of
Mhm.
mompreneurs are probably considering podcasts. So I'm happy to
Mhm.
talk
Mhm.
podcasts all day. I love the
Mhm.
podcast.
Yeah.
But as you know, podcasts are a long game, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Mhm.
I launched the podcast with full awareness that I genuinely wanted to serve, and I knew that was part of my path. I just had a knowing. I
Yeah.
also had, if you'll recall, had a master's in journalism, and in my reflection, I was like, what have I ever done in my life that I've absolutely loved? I loved interviewing people, loved
Mhm.
connecting.
Mhm.
So I actually launched my podcast, and after that was up and running, I began to inch by inch build out my business.
Mhm.
My first program that I created was Season to Shift. It's my
Mhm.
signature 6-week mastermind. And back to what we were saying of you don't realize why you need to go through something. I help
Mhm.
moms who are in that liminal space hopefully collapse time and step into a more powerful feeling of who they're
Mhm.
meant to be and kind
Mhm.
of re-identify with their roles outside of work, outside of motherhood, because I just know what it's like to be in that murky middle. And I
Mhm.
went through years, I mean, years of trial and
Mhm.
error, that awful feeling like I had talent on the table and I was meant
Mhm.
for more, but I didn't know
Mhm.
what to do. And I was frustrated almost to the point of being resentful. I was like, what's wrong with me? I want to plug in. I want to shine bigger. And I
Right.
couldn't find a way. And so I knew that's where I needed to start. I don't want
Mhm.
other moms to have to spend that much time. So I created my program based on kind of exactly what worked for me.
Mhm.
And then meditation has been a tool that's been very important for me. We're talking about soul searching, and
Mhm.
none of this stuff is, I mean, it's kind of stair steps and layers, so it's complicated. But I started meditating in 2019 and have
Mhm.
meditated almost every day since.
Mhm.
Has been a transformative practice for me. And it's something that I integrated into my program.
Yeah.
But I wasn't calling it meditation because I still had that imposter syndrome in the beginning of who am I
Mhm.
to say I can teach this? And so it actually came after I did my program where I
Mhm.
became a certified meditation teacher and was able to just really take what I share and what I teach to another layer of depth with confidence.
Mhm. That's such a cool story. And I love that you do that because it is so necessary. And like I said, we can lose ourselves in motherhood. And I wanted to talk to you about reinventing. I think we have to reinvent what we think about motherhood now that we can really have the choice to do what we want and what that looks like. And that is freeing and scary at the same time. It's like, oh, so yeah, what is your opinion and thoughts about how motherhood is being reinvented and or what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I can tell you with so much clarity from working with so many women that they're craving a new paradigm for what a working mom can look like.
Yeah.
And most of the women I work with really want to show up with more presence for their family. And they, of
Mm-hmm.
course, want to be a good mom, but they don't want to have all their eggs in just that basket. And so
Right.
they're really shifting into realizing that by taking the brave step and finding work
Mm-hmm.
or something else. I mean, I feel like purpose doesn't have to be a paid role, but maybe it is.
Right.
It's, only
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you are someone who feels like there's more out there for you, there is. I think some mothers really want to be a stay-at-home mom and focus on that. Wonderful. It's the most
Yeah.
important job in the world. I
Mm-hmm.
think some
Sure.
others feel called to be CFOs for Fortune 500s.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. We need all of you.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that there's a huge swath in between
Mm-hmm.
where they want to do more of what lights them up and they want to
Mm-hmm.
model that joy and purpose for their children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're looking for a new way.
Right. Yeah. And it's totally possible. And I love, I was just talking to someone who created this ready to go lactation tea. It was something that she needed. She had multiple children and didn't have time to like mix the tea that would help her. And, what was so surprising is the fulfillment. Like you go into it thinking like, oh, I want to be of service and whatnot. So can you talk about how, fulfilling on a level maybe that was unexpected for you in pursuing this?
Oh my gosh, I got goosebumps like when you asked that. So fulfilling. I feel like my heart for so long, I think I was hard on myself because I was like, what a privilege. I started working when I was 12. I've saved, and I'm lucky enough to have a partner so that I could take a shift and
Mm-hmm.
shift down in gears and have a little time. And for a long time, I was just like, what is wrong with me? Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
not, it was like I couldn't let myself feel how I felt because I felt
Mm-hmm.
guilty. Like, geez, so many women would kill to be able to be flexible, and I can't be happy right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I really came around to realizing that it's just my heart wanted to do bigger things and reach more people. And I've
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to be of service,
Right.
always since I was a little girl. And
Mm-hmm.
the more I step into this role that I'm called to play, the better
Mm-hmm.
and better it gets.
Yeah.
And it's been just incredible. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying there hasn't been bumps in the road and stress and ups and
Mm-hmm.
downs. I don't want to sugarcoat it, but on a base level, I have so much more peace because I'm building something that will be a legacy for me. I'm on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And when I know that, it doesn't matter if it seems sometimes that I'm building it brick by brick. It doesn't have to happen
Mm-hmm.
overnight because I'm on the right path.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So keeping in mind that, we're mothers and we had to go through this experience to kind of reinvent ourselves and come home to ourselves. And want we don't want our children to have to go through the same process. What do you think that we can teach our children about not having to go through this process
Mm,
and, you know, knowing themselves? Because I know as a mom, especially to girls, it's so important for me to let them do things like choose their own clothes, choose their
mhm.
own food. Um, let them have as much agency in their life at this point as possible because quite honestly, even until a few years ago, I I was so controlled at a young age about everything that I didn't know what I wanted, you know? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on ways as moms that we can model a future for them where they don't have to go through this identity crisis.
I think that this is such an important topic and something I think about a lot. And I won't claim to have the answers for parenthood, but I think given where I'm at in my journey, I feel like I guess two things. One, I really encourage my daughters to build self-trust, and
Hmm.
then I let them make the decision. This has come up time and time again. Am I
Hmm.
going to play the competitive basketball again? Am I going to join this? Am I going to do this? And I think a lot of us, I also grew up in a high achiever. Both of my older, I'm the youngest of three. Both of my sisters were captain of the tennis team and valedictorians. Both of my parents are type A. I really have unpeeled the layers of not need of that just not being me.
Hmm.
And I think the more we can give our children an opportunity to build self-trust
Yeah.
and explore what truly lights them up, the
Hmm.
less time they're going to be spending in their late 20s saying, "Who the hell am I?"
Hmm. Yeah.
Another
Now,
important,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, 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 no. Go ahead.
I think one of the toughest lessons as parents, too, for me at least, is reminding and really living out just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it and doesn't mean you have to like it. And I think when the parents see a child who has a talent, it's a
Hmm.
very careful balance between nurturing, nourishing, little push if but sometimes it just gives me peace to know, guess what? They can always come back to that, or maybe that's not
Hmm.
their calling. And the more I can help them find things that they would do without me prompting them,
Hmm.
better they are set up to find what's really going to bring fulfillment long term.
Yes. With that, that is a really good point and something that I've had to deal with my daughters too. They're both talented dancers, and the dance world can be full of pressure and perfectionism and criticism. And man, there are a lot of parents out there living vicariously through their children. And I am not one of them, even though it's hard to stand back and they say they need a break. In my mind, I'm going, but you have to give them that space. And I think that that's so critical. I think that's a really good point and a reminder that we get so wrapped up in parenthood with other people's expectations and the school's expectations, families' expectations, coaches' expectations, and we kind of farm out our role as a buffer between those things and advocating for our kids. When for some reason our society doesn't have a tendency to listen to children, or they think they don't know what do they know? They're kids. Well, actually, they know a lot, and they're way more dialed in than we are. So
Yeah.
I think that that's a really important point, and I think at most points parents have a struggle with that. In letting your children make their own decisions about their own lives and in one way or another. I mean, at the same time we're reinventing motherhood, we're also reinventing entrepreneurship, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is just so incredible. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how, what were your thoughts on entrepreneurship before, it kind of played itself out and what it looks like for you? Because I think it looks differently for everyone.
I didn't know this whole world of soulful entrepreneurship existed.
Yeah.
And I think that I thought of entrepreneurship. I mean, my dad is an entrepreneur. He's in the concrete industry. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was my model.
Mm-hmm.
And hooray for having somebody, an entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
model. But that is such a different vibe than where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I think that the main shift for me
Mm-hmm.
is this new, I guess, this new group that I find of lots of mompreneurs
Mm-hmm.
embrace collaboration
Mm-hmm.
over competition.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's just a different energy. It's just this knowing
Mm-hmm.
that I see you, and
Mm-hmm.
me lifting my boat helps lift you. And
Mm-hmm.
likewise, I just have not experienced any of the cutthroat
Mm-hmm.
energy that I'm
Yeah.
so was done with from my previous career choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm so glad.
Mm-hmm. Gosh,
I
I love
also
that. No, I
I
love
also
that response. Because it's so right. I mean, it's something I haven't thought about, but that also begs the question. So, before you took this entrepreneurial journey, were you into meditation or anything, or is this something new?
I think I've always had a spiritual niggle and been
Okay.
reading the books and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But during that peak craziness time, I think I can say now,
Mm-hmm.
where I was
Mm-hmm.
working my tail off,
Mm-hmm.
in the rhythm of work, come home, do all the kids stuff, get the kids down, log back on, because there's just
Mm-hmm.
not enough hours in the day, was my attitude. And I was just in a
Yeah.
very, there were some years where I was just a very different person. And
Mm-hmm.
I completely eclipsed that part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think after quitting, and I did a 2-week program where I learned to meditate, and just re-anchoring to a spiritual practice was something
Mm-hmm.
that helped set the trajectory for me in terms of stepping away from what I really didn't want in my life, and also starting things like my business
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
I felt called to.
Mm-hmm. I love that because I know I work with people or talk to them and I go, you're an entrepreneur, right? And they're like, well, oh no, 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 no. That's not what I am. And I'm like, no, because they have this concept of like a more masculine energy, kind of like you said, like cutthroat. I don't know, maybe some old 80s movies coming to mind or whatever. Um, but entrepreneurship can look very different now. And I totally agree with your experience in that I haven't had that cutthroat, like, I don't know, it's kind of like you can pick and choose who you want to, bring into your circle and work with and talk to. And it's actually a good thing not to say yes to everybody. It's like you get to choose that. So we were talking a little bit earlier about social media and how that can be very tough in starting and growing your business. And I think, it's the same thing with social media as it is a business. It can seem very intimidating. It can be a very harsh environment, but there are ways to make it work for you. So, can you talk about like what your experience with social media on your entrepreneurial journey and what that's been like?
Yes, I think it's an important topic right now, and I have a lot of things coming to mind. I will say in the very beginning, I think it's super normal to have some imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't, when I was just launching my business, I was ready to step out. And I know that if you're doing something and you're excited to share it, but nobody knows about it, how are you going to share it?
Hmm.
I mean, it just kind of comes down to that with a lot of women I've talked to about this. It's like you're
Hmm.
showing up and you were ready to do the thing, but if the people don't know about the thing, how are you going to sell that vegan lasagna or that like
Mhm.
perfect, whatever you do?
Right.
And so I realized actually, I just, after a lot of reflection, I
Mhm.
realized that I did have some fears about like, what's so and so gonna think if I just start talking about this? And
Yeah.
those, like a lot of the people that I like mentally was like, oh, how about that person aren't even on social media. Like it just is like it just came down to for me in the very beginning. I mean, I've made leaps and bounds, but in the very beginning, I think you have to go through some trial and error, and then I think you need to set your own boundaries. I think you need to drown out the noise, stop clicking around, getting ideas and taking classes and reading about how you're supposed to do it and just do the thing. And my advice is to try to pick a minimum target of when you're going to show up and pick
Mhm.
one that feels actually doable and just
Mhm.
start there. I think too many people, when they launch their business, think they need to be like Facebook, LinkedIn, like all these
Mhm.
different things and
Yeah.
go like full blown. And I'm not saying that you can't grow,
Mhm.
but give yourself permission to start and master and practice, because
Mhm.
the more
Mhm.
you just do it, the easier it becomes. It's kind of like a skill. And I don't think people think
Mhm.
about it that way.
Mhm.
I also very intentionally right now, and still, even though every single week someone's like, you should be on YouTube. Oh my gosh, you got to get on Twitter, all this stuff. For my sanity, I'm only on Instagram right now. And guess why? Because I like it.
Right.
I don't need to, I'm just
Mhm.
not.
Yeah.
And I know that if I like the platform, that
Mhm.
my energy is going to be good and it's not going to be
Mhm.
forced. That doesn't mean that I can't expand later, but I feel
Mhm.
like instead of getting into overwhelm, start with a start with the platform that you most are energized by
Mhm. Yeah.
or you like using,
Mhm.
and see if you can focus on at least showing up with some consistency there before you try to do it all. So I would say
Mhm.
that's one.
Mhm.
Two, whenever I go on, not whenever, but the majority of time I go on social media, I set a time boundary and I set a literal timer. And when that
Mhm.
timer goes off, I'm done.
Yeah. That's a really great idea. Mhm.
And then finally, and this is going to hit with some people and some people not, I think we need to stop being so precious with what we're sharing and just know that we, our flawed selves are our authentic selves, and just giving yourself permission to share that
Mhm.
is probably what is going to pull people in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, a couple of things. I hear that over and over again, and I think it comes from a place where we're looking at what other people are doing and we think we're doing what we should do. And there are so many people telling you, you should do this, post 3 times a day, do 4 reels, do this, do that. And ultimately, regarding, whatever you've learned, whatever coach you've had or whatnot, you have to know what's good for you and what feels right. And that's what my word for 2023 was, good. And people were like, what? That's not enough. You need like this energizing. And I'm like, no, you don't understand the importance of just doing what feels good, like what feels right. That's so important. I don't care. I don't need to be tearing down a wall 24 hours a day. It's.
And I think we all need to remember that Instagram is a channel, or social media. I mean, they're
Mhm.
tactics. They're not a strategy. And
Mhm.
so when you're spending a disproportionate time there,
Mhm.
what are you not doing from a business building perspective?
Mhm.
And I feel like that's why I like Instagram. I think it's been a great way for me to grow my community And I've probably only brought in a couple new clients that way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that'll shift, but I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we have to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, then that's a really interesting perspective. So, what is the way that you feel like you do invite more clients if it's not social media? Because that's a good point. Most people see it as an avenue to bring clients in, and I totally agree with you that that's not necessarily how that happens.
Well, so the podcast has been more of a people have told me, I found your podcast. And I think the long format really does build a like no trust. And this is why I'm still new in my business, but I
Mm-hmm.
have had people tell me I've had the incredible thing of feeling like I don't have to sell what I'm about or my
Mm-hmm.
program, because there's been some people who are like, I know exactly what I'm signing up for just because I've listened to all your podcasts and I know who you are
Mm-hmm.
and I want to be on your ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I totally agree that having a podcast, or maybe it's blogging, or maybe you do videos or whatnot, it's all of it is part of a bigger strategy. And that a lot of people can not only get overwhelmed because when you go on Instagram or whatnot, unfortunately, the algorithm starts sending you all the people who are doing the same thing you are. And it's like, dang it, stop that. Um, but yeah, and if they don't realize that that's not the basket you should put all of your eggs in, they can um feel really disheartened quickly. Like, you know, and see that as some sort of message that, whatever they want to do is not validated by a community or an audience. So I agree with that so much. So yeah, let's talk about your podcast and what that was like starting Electric Ideas. I think it's such a cool name because I don't know, for me it conjures up a thought that I think even as moms, going about our day, doing whatever it is that we're doing, we don't stop and think. We don't have ideas, honestly. So
Yes.
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, again, everything I've built has been built from that place of total stuckness and me really
Mm-hmm.
believing that the more women can step into themselves, the better the world will be. I really
Mm-hmm.
truly believe
Yeah.
that. And so the podcast is all about lighting women up with a new sense of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we're closed off from ourselves,
Yes.
and we're in the rush and whirlwind and reactive phase or week of life, that we are shut down from possibilities
Mm-hmm.
that could really change our life. And so my message is you're never stuck. There's always something, regardless of your circumstances, that you can do within your existing life circumstances to
Mm-hmm.
make powerful, usually small shifts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think those small incremental shifts or changes or actions are really the most powerful. We have this thought that just because something is more complicated, it's better. And we overestimate how much effort or time like a small thing might take to do. So I totally agree with that. Um, so I think it's a powerful podcast. You have very thoughtful conversations. It's like sometimes I think I don't know, did you listen to NPR a lot when you were younger or
I've had my NPR days. Yeah.
yeah, I was like I was getting this sense I was listening to an episode. I was like, people who listen to NPR at one point in their life, just like recreating those driveway moments in their life now. I don't
That's a high compliment. Thank
know.
you.
Like, is that what we're doing or like attempting to do? It's like, I don't know. I just had that thought the other day. I was like, because yeah, if I'm close to the end of an episode or something, I'll just sit in the driveway.
That's awesome. I love
But
that.
yeah. So, one thing I love about your podcast too is that you end the podcast with a reflective question. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time. We could talk forever. I mean, it's just like this podcast is my therapy because I mean, it's so lonely as a mom, but also an online entrepreneur. And, we have things like social media and whatnot that get in our heads and really separate us from our connectedness. So that's why these conversations, if nobody else listened to them, it doesn't matter. It fills my bucket. So it's
I
totally selfish.
No, it's self-aware. It's
Hmm.
love.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you have like a reflective question that you think that maybe would be beneficial for listeners to ponder as we close out this episode?
Love a reflective question. Thank you for giving me this
Yes.
opportunity. I think for mompreneurs, I would step back and really give yourself time to ask yourself, what would a dreamlike day look like for me right now?
Mhm.
And if I can have a follow up, how can I start stepping into this and what is standing between me and that day? And the reason I say this is I think a lot of women who are in overwhelm have this notion that, oh gosh, if I could just move to a beach and escape all my responsibilities, then I'd
Yeah.
be happy.
Right.
But you wouldn't have a sense of purpose. You wouldn't
Mhm.
have a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And so I think actually taking the time to look at within your everyday life, like when would you get up? How would you get up? Would you have something gentle for a few minutes, or would you have a screaming alarm or a child pulling on you?
Hmm.
What would you have for breakfast? Would you exercise?
Hmm.
All these things, and
Hmm.
not limit yourself and really write it out and then see when and how you can actually start believing that it's possible for you and where you can step into that, knowing that you're going to have to make some decisions about when and how your business fits in.
Hmm. Yeah. I love that reflection. I think it's so important too because yeah, as moms, we will do, if our kids want lessons or anything, we'll run out and do it. And we're so reluctant to do that for ourselves. Or when our children are small, we would never dream of limiting anything for them. Like the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want, but when it comes to ourselves, for some reason we put ourselves in this box. And so if anybody needs permission listening to this episode, you have it to get out of the box, I mean,
Yes.
Barbie didn't want to be in the box anymore. Don't be in the box.
I'm so with you. I think giving ourselves an opportunity to explore and knowing and recognizing and being okay with, there's this notion moms sometimes have that I think is misguided of getting back to myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And if we're really give ourselves a little space to think about it, there's lots of things you probably did pre-kids that maybe you don't even want anymore.
Mm. Yeah.
So it's not getting back to an old version. It's
Mm-hmm.
really getting into yourself. really retuning to what your heart wants and desires and needs and is craving right now. And then giving yourself permission to just micro step explore it. It can be game changing.
That's so profound and so on the money. So true. I've loved this conversation. Where can listeners connect with you?
Well, come hang out with me on Instagram. Like I said, I'm at Whitney Woman. And then my podcast, Electric Ideas, is where the deep conversations roll. And finally, my website is myelectricideas.com. So if you're curious about offerings or just seeing, for some entrepreneurs, I think it's nice just to see how other entrepreneurs structure things. And like I have to make a lot of decisions about was even on my website. So, check it out. And I just want to also say that if any of your listeners have questions about starting a meditation practice, I'm an open book. I love hearing from people and I'm here to help. I'm happy to hear from anybody.
I love that. And your website is so unique and so I think it's awesome. So definitely go check it out. I think it's great. It's definitely not a cookie cutter website. It's very reflective of like this conversation. It's not just like, oh, here I've got an about me page and da da da. It's like you truly get a sense of like your mission and your work. So I think that's incredible. Thank you, Whitney. Again, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
A delight. Thank you so much for having me.
Aw. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Good Enough Mompreneur Podcast with Whitney Baker. We hope you found valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your entrepreneurial journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay connected and informed about more incredible stories from successful mompreneurs just like Whitney. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it helpful, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach even more mompreneurs looking for guidance and motivation to make their dreams a reality. Be sure to connect with us too on social media, and you can reach out to us on our website at mombusinesscoach.com. A special thank you again to Whitney Baker for sharing her incredible story and expertise with us. You can learn more about Whitney and her work by visiting her website in the show notes. Be sure to check that out. Remember, you are good enough and your journey is worth celebrating. So keep striving for your goals and embracing the good enough mindset. Until next time, take care and keep going on your mompreneur journey. I'm your host, Angela Mashuli. I can't wait to talk to you next time. Bye.